Hi, my name's Lydia, and at 19 my family made sure the entire church knew I was quote the poor sister. They said it right in the pew, loud enough for the priest to hear, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst was knowing they'd planned it just like they had erased my name from every donation record that should have shown my contribution. But I had something they didn't expect, proof. And one final sermon they couldn't silence. Now I wonder, if your family set you up to fail, would you still find a way to shine? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The cathedral echoed with the sound of final rehearsals, stained glass windows casting colorful shadows across polished pews. The air smelled of fresh lilies and expensive perfume, a mix that made my nose itch as I adjusted another flower arrangement. St. Augustine's hadn't changed much since I was little. The same worn velvet kneelers, the same ornate altar with gold filigree, the same whispers that bounced off stone walls during prayer. I used to help Father James arrange hymnals in these very pews when I was small, dreaming that one day I'd walk down this aisle for something important. But now at 28, I was still pinning boutonnieres and straightening tablecloths, not because I wanted to be here, but because I'd said yes when no one else would help. Victoria was already there, standing beneath the archway like she'd been born with a halo around her head. My older sister could charm saints and sinners alike, perfect smile, perfect hair, the kind of presence that made people listen to things that weren't profound. She waved to our mother who sat in the front pew, then turned to the wedding planner and laughed loudly. "This altar arrangement is divine, don't you think?" I told Mom we needed the premium package. She caught sight of me adjusting the unity candle and smirked. "Mom said you're helping with the setup. So sweet of you to volunteer again." I pressed my lips together but said nothing. It wasn't worth the breath. The wedding coordinator handed me a clipboard without a word. I was background again. I always had been. Then from her seat near the front, Mom turned to my aunt beside her and said, loud enough for everyone within 15 feet to hear, "She's just helping with the setup. She's always been more practical than successful, bless her heart." The words landed like ice water. Nobody gasped. Nobody offered sympathetic glances. Just a few knowing nods and small chuckles like it was harmless family teasing. I didn't flinch, I'd learned not to. My face remained neutral, my posture straight, but inside me something sharp twisted a little deeper. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the church basement checking the list of reception details. That's when Victoria cornered me, champagne glass already in hand hours before the ceremony, voice sticky sweet as artificial honey. "Hey sis, you're not seriously wearing that plain dress tomorrow, are you?" she asked, voice bouncing off the concrete walls. "People come to weddings to see beauty, not bargain rack basics." "This is just for the rehearsal," I said flatly. "Right, of course. Mom figured you'd be better off helping the catering staff anyway. The bridal party photos are for immediate family only now. The photographer suggested we keep it streamlined." Her eyes widened in mock surprise. "Oh, awkward. You weren't told?" I marched straight to Mom, who was directing the florist and the narthex like a symphony conductor, acting like nothing had happened. "You cut me from the family photos?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. She barely looked up. "You're not photogenic, Lydia. You're practical. Be practical." The air felt like it had been vacuumed from the church. I should have shouted, should have said something that would crack her perfect composure, but I just stood there, hands curled into fists, breath shallow, because I knew it wouldn't matter. That evening, Victoria dropped by my apartment with a garment bag and a chirpy tone that set my teeth on edge. "Your outfit for tomorrow," she said, tossing it on my couch. "You'll look appropriate. Humble, authentic." I unzipped it slowly. A drab gray dress stared back at me, something that looked like it had come from a thrift store clearance rack. The fabric was thin, the hemline uneven, and it smelled faintly of mothballs. I tried it on. It hung from my shoulders like an apology, bunched at the waist in all the wrong places. I stood in front of the mirror, arms at my sides, heart pounding against my ribs. They wanted me small, humble, invisible. They wanted me to disappear behind the family they presented to the world. But I wasn't going to cry, not for them, not this time. I saved my crying for later, sitting in my car with the radio off and that awful dress folded in the passenger seat. It was late, the sky turning that deep indigo that always reminded me of forgotten promises, like birthday cards that never arrived or the college tuition my parents had saved for Victoria but not for me. I didn't drive straight home. I wandered aimlessly through quiet streets, past shuttered storefronts and empty parking lots until I found myself near the business district where Victoria's face smiled down from a massive real estate billboard. Her teeth practically glowed under the street lamp, the words, Victoria Matthews, Luxury Properties, Top Producer, in bold print beside her perfect face. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I remembered helping her stage her first listing. She didn't use my furniture arrangement suggestions, of course. She said my ideas were too cozy, not aspirational enough. The commission check she earned that weekend was more than I made in 3 months at the community center. The next morning, I arrived at the church earlier than necessary. Not to impress anyone, I just didn't want to walk in with the crowd, didn't want to feel their eyes assessing my discount rack appearance. The sanctuary was empty except for Father James arranging his notes at the pulpit and Mrs. Keller playing soft preludes on the organ. I slipped into the sacristy where the wedding party would gather later. That's when I heard them, Victoria's voice bright as ever, echoing from the bride's room across the hall. I mean, Lydia's sweet, bless her, but she's not exactly presentation material. Letting her sit with the family is basically a charity case. Another voice responded, deeper and unfamiliar. The groom's mother, I realized. She let out a light, forced chuckle, no disagreement, just enough acknowledgement to let the insult land and linger. I stayed frozen in place, not out of shock but out of knowing. Knowing that this had always been how they spoke when they thought I couldn't hear. When I was 10 and they called me the helper child. When I was 16 and they bought Victoria a car for graduation while I took the bus to my after-school job. When I was 22 and Victoria got our grandmother's heirloom jewelry while I got a coffee mug that said, World's OK's daughter. They thought they were slick, that calling me practical was a compliment, that I didn't notice who got the spotlight and who got the folding chairs. I moved to the back of the church and sat there a while, running my fingers along the hymnal spine. Like a sleeping friend. The sanctuary smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers, and for a moment I was 12 again, sitting in this very room while Victoria walked across the aisle to accept her confirmation with special honors. Mom had cried like she'd witnessed a miracle. I had gotten a group blessing with the other children. My certificate was already bent by the time we got home. I eventually made my way to the vestibule to grab a wedding program. It was cream-colored. And embossed, clearly Victoria's choosing. Inside, her name appeared in gold script, Victoria Elizabeth Matthews, beloved daughter and bride. Mine buried on the last page under additional assistance, between the florist delivery service and the parking attendants. I didn't get angry, not outwardly. I just folded the program carefully, slipped it into my purse, and left through the side door. That night back in my apartment, I placed my Bible on the nightstand and stared at it. My finger traced over the worn leather cover, stopping at the gold embossed cross in the center. I remembered setting up my phone at the groundbreaking ceremony 3 years ago, pressing record, then scanning the empty chairs where Mom had promised she'd be. She had to take Victoria to taste wedding cakes that day. We'll make it up to you, she'd said. They never did. So I watched myself on that small screen, slightly awkward posture, yes, but steady hands and clear voice as I stood beside Father James with the ceremonial shovel. A project I had arranged myself, coordinated myself, and largely funded myself from the inheritance my grandfather had left me. The church expansion that would host Victoria's wedding tomorrow. I had let them script my place for years, let them hand me the helper clipboard while they passed the spotlight to Victoria. But tonight, something inside me cracked just enough to let the truth in. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't weak. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't done yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was overwhelmed or upset, no, I was alert, awake in a way I hadn't been in years. I cleaned my apartment twice, reorganized my bookshelf, even pulled out all my bank statements and donation receipts, arranging them in chronological order. Somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., Father James texted to confirm I'd be handling the guest book. Of course, I wrote back. I'll be there early. I stared at his message for a few minutes, then slowly looked over at the stack of financial records on my coffee table. The house was quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming and the occasional car passing on the street below. That's when I opened my laptop and typed a brief email to Father James. No drama, no accusations, just facts and figures with the subject line, St. Augustine's Expansion Fund, complete records. Attached was a folder containing every donation I'd made, every volunteer hour I'd logged, every grant I'd written that helped fund the new wing where Victoria would say her vows. The receipts my parents had insisted be kept in the family's name, for tax purposes. I hovered over the send button for a long moment. My hands didn't shake, but my stomach did that weird slow turn like when you're waiting for test results. You already expect. Then I clicked. By mid-morning Saturday, the church parking lot was jammed. The wedding had drawn the entire community, a society event disguised as a sacred ceremony. Luxury cars lined the circular drive, women in fascinator hats air-kissed each other's cheeks, men in expensive suits checked gold watches. I pulled into a side spot and kept my sunglasses on even though clouds covered most of the sun. Victoria was already inside, holding court in the bride's room. I saw Mom directing the photographer, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and carrying a bouquet of orchids, Victoria's favorites. No one noticed me as I slipped through the side entrance in my drab gray dress, practical shoes, and minimal makeup. I made my way to the vestibule where volunteers bustled around with headsets and checklists. I had one too, mine was legitimate, but nobody checked what I was doing. I was the invisible helper, the background girl, the practical one. I stuck to my corner and kept arranging the guest book pages, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Time moved in strange increments. Guests filled the pews, the string quartet played pichelbel, groomsmen in matching tuxedos lined up near the altar. Victoria would make her entrance soon, Mom would cry perfect tears, and I would blend into the woodwork. Like always. But then I saw Father James approaching, prayer book in hand, expression unreadable. He stopped beside me, voice low. "I received your email," he said simply. I had no idea. I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. "The complete records will be acknowledged," he added before moving toward the sanctuary. The wedding processional began right on schedule. Bridesmaids floated down the aisle in champagne-colored dresses that cost more than my car payment. Flower girls scattered rose petals. The music swelled as Victoria appeared at the entrance, radiant in designer white, clutching Dad's arm like he was escorting royalty. Father James welcomed everyone with the traditional greeting, his voice filling the vaulted ceiling. But then he did something unexpected. He gestured to the walls around them, the new stained glass windows, the expanded sanctuary that could now hold 300 instead of the original 100. "Before we begin this celebration of love," he said, "I want to acknowledge something important about the sacred space where we gather. Many of you attended our expansion dedication last year, but few know the full story of how it came to be." Victoria shifted slightly at the altar, her perfect smile faltering just a fraction. Mom's posture stiffened in the front pew. "This beautiful addition to our church," Father James continued, "the very space where this wedding is taking place today, was made possible largely through the dedication of one person who never sought recognition." He paused, his eyes finding me in the back corner where I stood, guest book in hand. Lydia Matthews contributed not only the seed money from her grandfather's inheritance but wrote the grants that funded the majority of this project. She coordinated volunteers, managed contractors, and personally put in countless hours to create the sacred space we enjoy today. A murmur rippled through the congregation. Heads turned, searching for me in my gray dress, pressed against the back wall. "The official records have now been corrected to reflect this truth," Father James said firmly. "As we celebrate this union, let us remember that true generosity isn't measured in recognition but in quiet service, though that service should never go unacknowledged." Victoria's face froze in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mom's complexion had turned ashen. Dad studied his shoes. The moment stretched, uncomfortable and raw, until Father James smoothly transitioned to the wedding ceremony itself. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the stunned glances now coming my way. I simply stood straighter, clipboard held against my chest like a shield, and for the first time in years, I breathed fully, deeply, without the weight of invisibility pressing down on my lungs. Someone in the congregation whispered, "I had no idea she did all that." Another person nudged their companion and asked, "Is that her in the gray dress?" The whisper received a reply, "Yes, can you believe it? She built this entire wing." I didn't smile, but something in my spine straightened, my steps steadier as I quietly moved to take my place for the ceremony. I let myself feel, not proud exactly, but present in a way I hadn't allowed before. The wedding continued, vows exchanged, rings presented, the unity candle lit with perfect choreography. I played my assigned role, standing when expected, helping elderly guests find the right page in the hymnal, directing latecomers to available seats. But something had shifted, in me, in the air around me, in the way people's eyes lingered a moment longer when I passed. I caught a glimpse of Mom during the final blessing. She was flanked by two of her bridge club friends near the front, her lips pressed into that tight smile she used when she was about to tear someone apart. "I don't know why James had to make such a production," she whispered to them, voice low but sharp. "We never approved anything like that. It was a family donation, not an individual thing." One of the women gave a nervous chuckle, unsure whether to agree. I didn't move, my pulse pounding in my ears, but everything else inside me went still. "Like a pond freezing over." She continued, louder now, I know she's been difficult since high school. This kind of attention-seeking, it's probably overwhelming for her." difficult, attention-seeking, overwhelming. As if what just happened hadn't been truth but manipulation. As if my contributions hadn't been real but fabricated. I turned away, moving silently toward the vestibule where guests would soon gather for the receiving line. Victoria stood under one of the new archways I had helped design, laughing with her bridesmaids, some of whom I recognized from our childhood. She was radiant in her designer gown, the cathedral train spread out behind her like a royal proclamation. "Can you believe Father James?" Victoria was saying. "So inappropriate during my ceremony. That's her thing though, isn't it? Sad eyes, poor me, and boom, sympathy spotlight." Laughter rippled around her like perfumed air. She turned slightly, her whole life is some sob story. Remember when she used to cry because she couldn't afford cheerleading camp? Another bridesmaid added, "Props for effort though, building a whole church wing just to get noticed." "She's always been good at playing the martyr," Victoria said with a dismissive wave. "Even got Dad feeling guilty about it half the time. It's exhausting." I walked right past them, not a glance, not a word, not even a breath held. But inside my stomach twisted tight, my hands ached from clenching, and something more dangerous than anger was beginning to take shape. After the ceremony, I helped direct guests to the reception hall in the new parish center, another project I had coordinated. Mrs. Keller, the church organist, found me near the punch bowl. She gave me a soft smile, the kind reserved for people who deserve better but don't know how to claim it. "What you did for this church was remarkable," she said quietly. "You should have been recognized long before today." I wanted to say thank you, wanted to let that acknowledgement land and take root. But before I could speak, footsteps approached from behind. "She's always had potential," my mother's voice chimed in. "But she hasn't exactly made the most of it. We try not to pressure her, you know, given her history. She's sensitive." Mrs. Keller blinked, her expression shifting from warmth to confusion. "She's been fragile for years," Mom added, her voice gentle and concerned. "We just want to support her without pushing too hard." Mrs. Keller nodded slowly, made an excuse about checking the music playlist, and walked away. I stood there. I didn't argue. I didn't explode. I didn't cry. Instead, I slipped out the side door and sat in my car with the engine off, staring at the church's new stained glass window, the one I had commissioned using half of my grandfather's inheritance. The reception continued without me. No one came looking. No one called. I was background again, necessary for setup but not for celebration. I drove home with the radio off, the gray dress scratching against my skin like a physical manifestation of how they saw me. Later that night, I sat on my bed with my laptop open and the apartment quiet. I watched the church groundbreaking video again, not because I needed to but because I wanted to remember it was real, that it happened, that I made it happen. I heard her voice again in my mind, fragile, sensitive, difficult, as if I'd been some unwelcome intruder in my own family story. That's when I opened a new browser tab. My fingers didn't hesitate. I typed "community leadership program applications" and found 3 possibilities. I bookmarked them, wrote down the deadlines, and then emailed the diocesan office asking about their upcoming mission committee openings. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. No tearful confrontation, no revenge fantasy. Just a quiet line drawn in the sand. Because if they wouldn't see me, I'd find a world that did. And I already had a plan. I didn't sleep that night, but it wasn't the kind of insomnia that leaves you hollow and drained. It was the kind that sharpens your vision, that turns vague ideas into clear pathways. I sat up in bed, legs crossed, laptop casting the only light in the room besides the distant street lamp filtering through my blinds. I'd replayed the groundbreaking ceremony 3 times. Not for reassurance, that moment had passed. Now it was about clarity. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I propped my phone against a stack of books and began recording. I didn't script what I would say. I didn't rehearse. I just spoke. "This isn't about victimhood," I began. "It's about visibility. For years, I've let others define my worth and place. I've accepted being the background sister, the practical one, the helper who never quite becomes the hero of her own story." I paused, letting the words settle in the quiet of my apartment. When my grandfather died, he left equal inheritances to my sister and me. My portion went to building a place where people could gather in community, find peace, and celebrate life's moments. I never asked for recognition. But I never expected erasure either. I explained how the church expansion project had started, how I'd spent evenings writing grant proposals while working full-time at the community center. How I'd coordinated volunteers on weekends, negotiated with contractors, and personally selected the stained glass designs. How my parents had insisted all documentation list the family name rather than mine specifically, for tax purposes, they'd said. When you spend your life being told you're less beautiful, less successful, less worthy of the spotlight, you start to believe it. You accept the gray dress at the wedding. You take the backstage role. You stop expecting your name to appear anywhere but the footnotes. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke truth into existence like breathing life into coals. But sometimes the universe has a way of correcting the record. Today, in the church I helped build, during my sister's perfect wedding, a priest simply told the truth. And the truth, it turns out, is its own kind of freedom. I ended the recording. Without flourish, just a simple, "Thank you for listening." Then I uploaded it to the Diocesan Leadership Application portal as my personal statement. Not to escalate anything, not to create drama, just to ensure my voice was clear, my contribution acknowledged, my worth no longer a question to be debated by others. Monday morning arrived with unexpected momentum. I'd just finished my breakfast when an email notification appeared on my phone. Subject: Diocesan Leadership Committee, Interview Request. My stomach fluttered as I opened it. Dear Ms. Matthews, your application and personal statement for the Diocesan Leadership Committee have been received and reviewed. We were particularly moved by your candid reflection and demonstrated commitment to community building. We would like to schedule an interview at your earliest convenience. Bishop Montgomery has specifically requested to meet with you. I read it twice, making sure I understood correctly. Bishop Montgomery was the highest church authority in our diocese, someone who rarely involved himself in committee appointments. I replied with available times, then sat back, pulse quickening. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Lydia Matthews? A warm, female voice asked when I answered. Yes, speaking. This is Margaret Winters from the diocesan office. I'm calling about your application and that remarkable video statement. My breath caught. I hope it wasn't too personal or inappropriate. Quite the opposite, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It was exactly what this committee needs: honesty, humility, and clear vision. Bishop Montgomery watched it this morning and said, and I quote, "This is someone who understands what service really means." The conversation continued, details about the interview, committee responsibilities, vision for community outreach. But what stayed with me after we hung up was what she said at the end. You know, Lydia, I've been executive assistant to 3 bishops over 20 years. I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen one of them personally intervene in a committee appointment process. Whatever you said in that video, it resonated. I sat at my kitchen table long after the call ended, fingers wrapped around a cooling mug of coffee, mind racing with possibilities I had never allowed myself to consider. The peace was short-lived. That afternoon, while restocking supplies at the community center where I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. We need to talk. Dinner tonight? Morton's at 7. No please, no question mark. Just Victoria being Victoria, expecting the world to align with her commands. I didn't respond immediately. Morton's was expensive, showy, exactly her style and exactly not mine. But curiosity won out. Can't do Morton's. Coffee at Riverside. Cafe at 6? Her response came quickly, fine. Don't be late. Riverside Cafe was halfway between my apartment and her office, neutral territory with good lighting and witnesses. I arrived exactly on time to find Victoria already seated, wedding ring catching the light with every dramatic hand gesture as she spoke rapidly into her phone. Absolutely unacceptable, she was saying. I don't care what the listing agent told you, we're not paying over appraisal. Make it happen. She hung up without a goodbye just as I reached the table. You look tired, she said instead of hello. Long day, I replied, settling into the chair across from her. What did you want to talk about? She didn't answer immediately, studying me like I was a property with questionable foundation issues. The server brought my coffee and Victoria's sparkling water before she finally spoke. Father James called Mom this morning, she said, voice measured. Apparently the Church Finance Committee is planning to install a donor plaque for the expansion project. With your name. Just yours. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the information settle. That's nice of them, I said finally. Nice? Her perfect eyebrows arched. It's problematic, Lydia. We're a family. The donation was a family contribution. Was it though? I asked quietly. Of course it was, she insisted, leaning forward. Dad's tax write-off, Mom's committee oversight, my design input. You may have done the paperwork, but it was a family effort. I set my cup down carefully. Victoria, you rejected every design proposal I made. Mom attended 2 committee meetings out of 36. And Dad's tax write-off was my inheritance from grandfather. My name wasn't on a single document until yesterday. Her expression hardened. That's how family works, Lydia. We all contribute differently. You're good with details and organization. I'm good with presentation and vision. Mom and Dad provided us the foundation to be who we are. And who am I, exactly? I asked, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. She waved dismissively. You know what I mean. You're the responsible one, the behind-the-scenes person. That's your strength. That's your convenience, I corrected gently. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What's gotten into you? Is this about the wedding? I told you the photographer wanted to streamline the family photos. This isn't about the wedding, I said. It's about years of being erased, minimized, and redefined. To fit whatever narrative makes everyone else comfortable. Dramatic much? She rolled her eyes. Look, we need you to call Father James and explain that you want the family name on the plaque, not just yours. It's the right thing to do. I studied my sister across the table, perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect life built on carefully constructed appearances. For the first time, I saw something else too, fear. Fear that the narrative was changing, that her supporting cast member was going off script. No, I said simply. No, she repeated as if I'd spoken in an alien language. No, I won't call Father James. If the committee wants to acknowledge my contribution specifically, that's their decision. Her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Mom is upset, Lydia. Really upset. She's talking about leaving the church if this happens. That's her choice, I said, feeling something like gravity shifting inside me. But I'm done being the family secret keeper. I'm done being background noise. And I'm done apologizing for taking up space in my own life. Victoria stared at me, genuinely speechless for perhaps the first time since childhood. Finally, she gathered her designer purse and stood. You've changed, she said accusingly. I smiled slightly. No, Victoria. I've remembered. She left without another word, the cafe door swinging closed behind her with a soft jingle of bells. I stayed, ordered another coffee, and watched the evening light change on the river through the window. Something had shifted, not dramatically but fundamentally, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known existed. That night, my phone lit up with notifications. First came the text from Mom, all capitals, call me immediately. Then Dad, your mother is very upset. Fix this. Then 3 missed calls from Victoria. I silenced my phone and opened my laptop instead. The diocesan interview was in 2 days. I had preparation to do. By Wednesday morning, my family had escalated from digital bombardment to physical intervention. I opened my apartment door to find my mother standing there, uninvited and unannounced, wearing the expression she reserved for family emergencies and poorly prepared holiday meals. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into my living room without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door slowly, centering myself before turning to face her. Good morning to you too, Mom. She surveyed my apartment with the quick, assessing glance she'd perfected over years of real estate open houses, noting the second-hand furniture, the overflowing bookshelf, the absence of designer labels or status symbols. This has gone far enough, she announced, setting her purse on my coffee table like a judge's gavel. Father James called again yesterday. They're planning some sort of special recognition ceremony for you next month. This is getting out of hand. I moved to the kitchen, filling the electric kettle. Would you like some tea? Lydia, are you listening to me? This is serious. Your father and I have been members of St. Augustine's for 30 years. We have a reputation. I reached for 2 mugs, ignoring the tightness forming in my chest. Yes, you've made that very clear my entire life. What is that supposed to mean? She perched on the edge of my sofa, back straight, ankles crossed, the posture of someone determined to maintain control. I returned with 2 mugs of tea, placing hers on a coaster. It means that from as far back as I can remember, the family image has always mattered more than my reality. That's ridiculous, she scoffed. We've always supported you. Have you? I asked quietly. When I wanted to apply for the art scholarship in high school, you told me not to embarrass myself because Victoria was the talented one. When I graduated college, you missed the ceremony because Victoria's housewarming party was the same weekend. When grandfather left me his inheritance, you insisted it go to family projects while Victoria spent hers on a down payment for her condo. Mom's face flushed. That's not fair. We've always recognized your practical contributions. As long as they stayed practical. As long as they stayed invisible. I took a careful sip of my tea. As long as I didn't ask for credit or recognition. Or even basic acknowledgement. You're twisting things, she insisted. We're a family. We support each other in different ways. Your sister is just more naturally suited to the spotlight. And I was naturally suited to the shadows? Or was I placed there for convenience? Mom set her untouched tea down with a sharp click against the coaster. I don't know where this is coming from, but it needs to stop. Call Father James. Tell him you want the family name on the plaque. Tell him you don't want a ceremony. If you care about this family at all, you'll fix this." I studied her across the coffee table, this woman who had shaped so much of how I saw myself, who had drawn the boundaries of my worth with such certainty that I'd never thought to question them until now. "I can't do that," I said finally. "Can't or won't?" Her voice had taken on the dangerous edge I remembered from childhood disagreements. "Both," I answered honestly. "What Father James and the committee choose to do is their decision. I won't interfere with that." She stood abruptly. "This isn't like you, Lydia. You've always been the reasonable one, the team player." "Maybe. You never knew me at all," I suggested gently. "Maybe you were too busy looking at Victoria to see me." Her expression hardened into something between anger and panic. "If you do this, if you let them single you out like this, you're going to damage this family. Is that what you want?" I stood too, my voice calm but firm. "What I want is to exist in my own right. What I want is to stop apologizing for taking up space. What I want is to be seen, Mom. Really seen." "We've always seen you," she insisted, gathering her purse with trembling hands. "No," I said softly. "You've always seen who you needed me to be. There's a difference." She left without another word, the door closing behind her with a final sounding click. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just stood in my living room, surrounded by the quiet of my own space, and breathed. Later that afternoon, I received another unexpected visitor. Father James stood at my door, his kind face concerned but resolute. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said when I opened the door. "But I thought we should talk." I invited him in, offering tea which he accepted with a grateful nod. We settled in my small living room, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. "Your mother came to see me this morning," he began without preamble. "I'm sorry about that," I said automatically, then caught myself. "Actually, no, I'm not sorry. That was her choice." He smiled slightly. Precisely what I told her. She seemed to think I could be persuaded to change the committee's decision about the donor recognition. "And can you?" "I could," he acknowledged. "But I won't. Truth matters in our community, Lydia. Recognition where it's due matters." I nodded, unsure what to say. "Your mother shared some concerns," he continued. Carefully. "She suggested you might be going through something difficult. That perhaps this sudden desire for recognition was out of character." I wasn't surprised, but the words still stung. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that in the 3 years I've known you, I've watched you pour your heart, soul, time, and resources into building something beautiful for others, while asking nothing for yourself. That doesn't strike me as the actions of someone unstable or attention-seeking." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Thank you. The truth shouldn't require thanks," he said gently. "But you're welcome all the same." We talked a while longer. About the upcoming recognition ceremony, about my diocesan committee interview, about the strange, shifting landscape of family dynamics. When he rose to leave, he paused at the door. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in my experience, the people most resistant to change are those who've benefited most from things staying the same." After he left, I stood at my window watching him walk to his car, his words echoing in my mind. For the first time in days, I picked up my phone and scrolled through the accumulated messages from my family. Accusations, guilt trips, demands wrapped in concern. The language of people desperate to maintain a status quo that served them. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I opened my closet and began sorting through my clothes, looking for something appropriate for tomorrow's interview. Not gray. Not invisible. Not apologetic. Something that would help me be seen. Thursday morning dawned with unexpected clarity. Sunshine streamed through my blinds, casting golden patterns across my bedroom floor. I'd chosen a deep blue dress for the interview, not flashy, but confident. As I fastened a simple silver necklace, my grandmother's, the only heirloom I'd been given, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret at the diocesan office. "Bishop Montgomery is looking forward to meeting you. Don't be nervous, just be yourself." Be myself. Such simple advice, yet it had taken me 28 years to understand what that actually meant. The diocesan offices occupied an old Victorian building downtown, all polished wood and stained glass. I arrived 15 minutes early, my portfolio tucked under my arm, heart steady despite the importance of the moment. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Ms. Matthews? They're ready for you early if that's all right." I nodded, following her down a hallway lined with portraits of previous bishops. The conference room door stood open, revealing not just Bishop Montgomery but 4 other committee members seated around a large oak table. They rose as I entered. "Lydia," the bishop said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. We've been looking forward to this." There was something in his manner, a genuine warmth, an absence of evaluation, that immediately put me at ease. I took the offered seat, placed my portfolio on the table, and met their gazes directly. "Before we begin," Bishop Montgomery said, "I want to clarify something. This isn't an interview in the traditional sense. Based on your application, your references, and particularly your personal statement, the committee has already voted. We'd like to offer you not just membership but the chairperson position on our community outreach initiative." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry?" A woman to the bishop's right, Dr. Eleanor Patel, according to her nameplate, smiled kindly. "We're launching a diocese-wide program focused on making our churches true community centers, offering services beyond Sunday worship. After seeing your work with the St. Augustine expansion, and hearing your perspective on inclusive community building, we believe you're exactly who we need leading this effort." But I hesitated, decades of conditioning making me search for the catch. There must be more qualified candidates. People with more experience or credentials. Bishop Montgomery leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Matthews, do you know what's rarer than experience or credentials? Authentic vision combined with proven follow-through. You didn't just talk about community building, you literally built one. With your own resources, time, and determination. While expecting nothing in return," added Father Ramirez, the eldest committee member. "That's the kind of leadership we need." I sat very still, absorbing their words, feeling something unfamiliar unfurling in my chest, not pride exactly, but recognition. Not of what I'd done, but of who I was. "The position comes with a modest stipend," Bishop Montgomery continued, sliding a folder toward me. "And a 2-year commitment. You'd be coordinating with 12 parishes initially, helping them develop sustainable community programs based on neighborhood needs. It would mean leaving your current job at the community center. And if I need time to consider?" I asked. "Of course," Dr. Patel said. "Though we'd hope for your answer within the week. The program launches next month." The rest of the meeting passed in a detailed discussion of the initiative's goals, potential challenges, and my ideas for implementation. Not once did anyone question my qualifications or suggest I might not be up to the task. They simply assumed I was capable, an experience so foreign it left me slightly dizzy. As the meeting concluded, Bishop Montgomery walked me to the door. "One more thing, Lydia. Father James mentioned some family complications regarding the recognition at St. Augustine's." I tensed slightly. "Yes. My family has concerns about the individual recognition." He nodded thoughtfully. "Families are complicated. But I want you to know that the diocese fully supports the truth being acknowledged. Your contribution was singular and significant. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I thanked him, shook hands with the committee members, and walked out into the bright afternoon feeling like I'd stepped into an alternate reality, one where I wasn't background noise but a voice worth hearing. The sensation lasted until I reached my car and checked my phone. 7 missed calls from Victoria. 3 from Mom. 1 from Dad, which was unusual enough to make me pause. I decided to call him back first, pulling into a coffee shop parking lot to make the call. He answered on the second ring. "Lydia." His voice sounded tired, strained in a way I rarely heard. "Dad. Is everything okay?" A heavy sigh. "Your mother is struggling with all this. The church situation. She's talking about finding a new parish." I gripped the steering wheel with my free hand. "I'm sorry she's upset, but I can't control how the church chooses to recognize contributions." "Can't or won't?" The echo of Mom's words from yesterday. "Both," I said again. "Dad, I spent 3 years working on that expansion. I put in most of my inheritance. I wrote the grants, coordinated the volunteers, selected the finishes. My name wasn't on a single document until Father James corrected the records. We're a family," he said, as if that explained everything. "We support each other. Your mother and I have always supported you." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "When did you last attend something important to me? When did you last acknowledge something I accomplished?" Silence stretched between us. Then, surprisingly, he said, "The science fair. 7th grade. Your project on solar energy." The memory surfaced unexpectedly, me standing beside my display board, nervous but excited, explaining to judges how my miniature solar panels worked. Dad in the background, actually paying attention, nodding along. "You remember that?" I asked. Surprised. "Of course I do." His voice softened. "You were brilliant. So passionate about renewable energy. I thought you might become an engineer. You never said anything." Another pause. "I suppose I didn't. Your mother thought it was important not to let praise go to your head. To keep you grounded. While Victoria got standing ovations for school plays and celebration dinners for selling houses?" He didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice had changed, become more hesitant. Your sister needs more external validation. You've always been stronger, more self-sufficient. I almost laughed at the irony. Dad, that's not strength. That's what happens when you learn your achievements don't matter to the people who should care most. That's not fair, Lydia. Isn't it? I challenged gently. When grandfather died and left us equal inheritances, Mom suggested, no, insisted, that mine go to family projects while Victoria bought her condo. When I graduated college, you missed the ceremony for Victoria's housewarming. When I coordinated the church expansion, suddenly it was a family contribution. Tell me where the unfairness lies. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with truths neither of us had spoken before. Finally, he sighed again. What do you want from us, Lydia? The question caught me off guard. Not because it was difficult, but because the answer came so readily. I want to be seen, I said simply. Not as the practical one or the helper or the background sister. Just as me, with my own strengths and accomplishments and value. And if we can't give you that? His voice was quiet, almost sad. I swallowed hard. Then I'll find it elsewhere. I already am. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, watching people come and go from the coffee shop. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, carrying their own invisible burdens and unspoken truths. I wondered how many of them were also waiting to be truly seen. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Committee was impressed. When can you start? I smiled and typed back, how about Monday? Her response came immediately, perfect. Contract will be ready tomorrow. Welcome aboard. That simple exchange, the straightforward recognition of value, the absence of qualification or minimization, felt revolutionary. I started the car and headed home, mind racing with possibilities for the new position. I was so absorbed in planning that I almost missed the luxury SUV parked in front of my apartment building. Almost, but not quite. Victoria's car was hard to miss. She was waiting in the lobby, scrolling through her phone with impatient flicks of her manicured finger. She looked up as the door closed behind me. Finally, she said, as if I'd kept her waiting on purpose. We need to talk. We talked yesterday. I reminded her, moving toward the stairs. Nothing's changed. She followed, heels clicking aggressively on the linoleum. Everything's changed, Lydia. Mom's talking about leaving the church. Dad's distracted at work. The donor plaque design is finalized. This has gone too far. I unlocked my apartment door, considering whether to invite her in. Decided I didn't have the energy for another confrontation in my personal space. We can talk here, I said, remaining in the hallway. She blinked, momentarily thrown by the boundary. Recovered quickly. Fine. Look, I know you're upset about the wedding and feeling overlooked. I get it. But this crusade for recognition is hurting the family. This isn't a crusade, Victoria. It's the truth finally being acknowledged. And I'm not hurting the family, I'm just refusing to keep playing a role that diminishes me. She made an exasperated sound. God, when did you get so dramatic? This isn't like you at all. Maybe you never knew me, I echoed the words I'd said to Mom. Maybe you were too busy being the star to notice anyone else in your orbit. Her perfect features hardened. That's not fair. I've always supported you. Have you? When? The direct question seemed to catch her off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it again. I recommended you for that volunteer coordinator position at the community center. Because the previous coordinator quit suddenly and you knew. I'd work for minimal pay, I pointed out. That wasn't support, Victoria. That was convenience. Her eyes narrowed. You've changed. No, I said again. I've remembered who I am. Who I've always been when I wasn't trying to make myself small enough to fit into the box you and Mom created for me. She studied me with new wariness, as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps she was. So what now? You're just going to let this church thing blow up the family? The only people creating drama are you and Mom. All that's happening is a truthful acknowledgement of who funded and coordinated the expansion. If that threatens your worldview so much, maybe the problem isn't with the recognition. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, then looked back at me. This isn't over. It could be, I suggested. You could simply accept that I did something significant and deserve credit for it. You could be happy for me instead of threatened. She didn't respond to that, just turned and walked away, heels striking the floor like punctuation marks. I watched her go, feeling strangely calm. The confrontation hadn't drained me as previous ones had. Instead, I felt lighter, as if each time I spoke my truth, a weight lifted. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and made a cup of tea, mind drifting back to the diocesan meeting. For the first time in my adult life, someone was offering me a position of leadership, not support. Of visibility, not background assistance. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. My phone chimed with an email notification from Father James, recognition ceremony details attached. Please review and confirm. I opened the attachment, scanning the program. There it was in black and white, St. Augustine's Church expansion. In recognition of Lydia Matthews. My name, not the family's. My contribution, not a collective effort. The truth, simple and unadorned. I replied with a brief, confirmed, thank you, then set my phone aside. That evening, as I sorted through papers for the new position, my doorbell rang. Not Victoria again, I thought with a sigh. But when I checked the peephole, it wasn't my sister or my parents standing there. It was Mrs. Keller, the church organist, clutching what looked like a folder to her chest. I opened the door, puzzled. Mrs. Keller? Is everything okay? She smiled, the fine lines around her eyes crinkling. Perfectly fine, dear. May I come in for a moment? There's something I think you should see. I invited her in, cleared a space at my small dining table. She sat carefully, placing the folder in front of her with reverent hands. I've been St. Augustine's organist for 38 years, she began. I've played for christenings, weddings, funerals. Seen families grow, change, sometimes fall apart. The church keeps records of everything, donations, volunteering, committee work. Official records, but also unofficial ones. She patted the folder. When your grandfather passed, I was there. Played his favorite hymn, Be Thou My Vision. After the service, he asked me to keep something for him. Said someday it might be needed. I'd nearly forgotten until all this business with the expansion recognition. She slid the folder toward me. I think it's time you had this. With careful fingers, I opened it. Inside was a letter, written in my grandfather's distinctive cursive, dated 2 weeks before he died. It was addressed to me. My dearest Lydia, it began. If you're reading this, then the time has come for you to know something important. You've likely realized by now that our family operates on certain unspoken rules. Your sister shines while you support. Your mother directs while you implement. Your father observes while you act. My throat tightened as I continued reading. This pattern didn't start with you. It began generations ago, one sibling elevated, another diminished. My brother was the golden child, I the practical one. Our mother before us experienced the same with her sister. It's a family legacy as toxic as it is invisible. I looked up at Mrs. Keller, who nodded encouragingly. You were never meant to be background, Lydia. You have a light your family doesn't recognize because they've been taught to value only certain kinds of brightness. I've left you half my estate not as consolation but as investment, in you, in your vision, in your future. Use it wisely, but use it for yourself too. Build something, yes, but make sure your name is on it. Tears blurred my vision as I read the final paragraph. Remember this always, you are not the other sister, or the practical one, or any of the limiting labels they've placed on you. You are Lydia, complete and worthy in yourself. When the time comes to claim your space, do it without apology. I'll be watching proudly from wherever I am. It was signed simply, with belief in you always, grandfather. I placed the letter down carefully, wiping tears from my cheeks. I had no idea. Mrs. Keller reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He knew. He saw you clearly, even when others didn't. And he wasn't the only one. Thank you for keeping this, I whispered. For bringing it now. She stood to leave, pausing at the door. You know, Lydia, sometimes the people who try hardest to make us invisible are the ones most afraid of being overshadowed. Your light doesn't diminish anyone else's. Remember that. After she left, I read the letter twice more, tracing my grandfather's handwriting with my fingertips. He had seen the pattern. Had tried, in his way, to break it. Had believed in me enough to provide not just financial inheritance but this truth, permission to claim my space, to shine without apology. I carefully placed the letter in my bedside drawer, next to the contract from the diocese that had arrived earlier. 2 tangible proofs that I wasn't imagining things, that the family dynamic wasn't just in my head, that my worth wasn't defined by their perception. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, my grandfather's words echoing in my dreams. You are Lydia, complete and worthy in yourself. The next morning, my phone rang early. Dad again, his voice hesitant. Your mother's decided to attend a different parish this Sunday. Victoria too. I absorbed this, surprised by how little it hurt. I understand. They need to do what feels right for them. And you, he asked. Will you still attend St. Augustine's? Even with this recognition ceremony coming up? Yes, I said simply. It's my church too. More than that, it's where I feel called to be right now. A pause, then he said something that caught me completely off guard. I've been thinking about what you said. About not seeing you. About missing your graduation. Another pause. You're right. We haven't been fair. I haven't been fair. I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed. Dad? I always told myself it was because you were stronger, more independent. That Victoria needed the attention more. But that was an excuse, wasn't it? For not showing up. For not acknowledging what you've accomplished. My throat tightened. Yes. I can't speak for your mother or sister, he continued. But I want you to know that I see it now. And I'm sorry, Lydia. Truly sorry. The words washed over me like cool water on a burn, not instantly healing, but soothing, promising eventual recovery. Thank you for saying that. There's something else, he added. I'd like to attend the recognition ceremony. If that's okay with you. I closed my eyes. Unexpected emotion rising. I'd like that very much. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, phone in hand, thinking about healing in truth and the courage it takes to change long-standing patterns. One conversation wouldn't fix decades of imbalance. One acknowledgement wouldn't erase years of invisibility. But it was a start, a crack in the foundation of a system that had limited all of us in different ways. Later that day, I signed the diocesan contract, officially accepting the community outreach position. As I printed my name on the signature line, Lydia Matthews, not daughter or sister or helper but just me, I felt my grandfather's presence like a gentle hand on my shoulder. That evening, I walked to St. Augustine's, letting myself in with the key Father James had given me years ago when I first started volunteering. The sanctuary was empty, peaceful in the fading light. I moved slowly up the center aisle, my footsteps echoing in the sacred space. The expansion wing stretched to my right, new pews, new windows, new possibilities. I had known every inch of this space intimately during construction, had agonized over details most people would never notice. My inheritance, my vision, my dedication made physical. I sat in a pew near the front, gazing up at the largest stained glass window, a design I'd selected depicting a community gathered around a table, diverse faces illuminated by shared light. When the morning sun hit it just right, it cast rainbow patterns across the entire sanctuary. It's quite beautiful. In this light. I turned to find Father James standing in the side aisle, hands in the pockets of his black pants, expression serene. I've always loved it at sunset, I agreed. He moved to sit beside me, both of us looking up at the window. The recognition plaque arrived today. They've mounted it in the foyer. Simple, elegant. Just your name and a brief acknowledgement. I nodded, surprisingly calm. I saw my father today. He's coming to the ceremony. And your mother? Victoria? No, I said quietly. They've decided to attend a different parish for now. He sighed softly. I'm sorry for that division. I am too. But I'm not sorry for the truth that caused it. We sat in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the colors shift as the sun descended lower. You know, Father James said finally, there's a sermon I've been working on for next week. About how true generosity isn't measured by recognition but by impact. About how sometimes the most meaningful contributions come from unexpected sources. About how God sees clearly what humans often overlook. I smiled slightly. Sounds inspirational. That's the hope, he agreed. Though I suspect there's one person in the congregation who won't need the reminder. As the last light faded from the stained glass, we sat together in the growing darkness, two people comfortable with silence, with truth, with the understanding that some journeys must be walked alone before others can join us on the path. In that moment, surrounded by the tangible results of my vision and dedication, I felt something settle in my chest, not pride or vindication, but peace. The kind that comes from finally standing in your truth without apology or qualification. The kind that feels like coming home to yourself. Sunday morning arrived with unexpected clarity. I stood in front of my closet, fingers trailing over fabrics, considering what to wear for the recognition ceremony. Not the gray dress Victoria had chosen for me at her wedding. Not anything that whispered apology or asked for less space. I selected a deep blue sheath dress, simple but elegant, with clean lines and quiet confidence. As I fastened my grandmother's silver necklace, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't transformed or unrecognizable. She was just present. Fully present in her own skin. My phone chimed with a text from Dad, meeting you at the church. 9:30 okay? I replied with a simple, perfect, and slipped the phone into my purse. The recognition ceremony wasn't elaborate, just a brief dedication before the regular Sunday service. But as I drove to St. Augustine's, I felt the weight of its significance pressing against my ribs. This wasn't just about a plaque or public acknowledgement. It was about claiming space that had always been mine but that I'd been conditioned to surrender. The church parking lot was surprisingly full for an early Sunday. I recognized most of the cars, regular parishioners, church committee members, a few neighbors. But there were others too, cars I didn't know, suggesting people had come specifically for the ceremony. Dad was waiting by the front steps, looking both uncomfortable and determined in his Sunday suit. His face relaxed slightly when he saw me. "You look nice," he said, the compliment awkward but sincere. "Thank you for coming," I replied, meaning it deeply. We walked in together, his presence beside me both foreign and familiar. The narthex was crowded with people, many of whom turned to offer smiles or nods as we entered. Near the entrance to the sanctuary, a small gathering had formed around something on the wall. The plaque. Simple brass with engraved lettering, St. Augustine's Church Expansion Wing made possible through the vision, coordination, and generous contribution of Lydia Matthews with gratitude for her faithful stewardship, 2025-inch no qualifications. No family name. Just the truth, polished and mounted for all to see. Dad stood very still beside me, reading it twice. Then, surprising me completely, he placed his hand on my shoulder and squeezed gently. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "And well-deserved." Before I could respond, Father James approached, robed and ready for the service but wearing a warm smile. "Lydia, Mr. Matthews. We're about to begin. Would you both come to the front pew?" We followed him into the sanctuary, which had filled nearly to capacity. As we walked down the center aisle, I felt the weight of eyes following us, not with judgment but with curiosity, maybe even admiration. My steps didn't falter. The service began traditionally, opening hymn, prayers, scripture readings. Then, Father James moved to stand beside the plaque, which had been temporarily moved inside for the dedication. "Before we continue with our regular worship today," he said, voice carrying easily through the space, "we gather for a special recognition. 3 years ago, this church embarked on an ambitious expansion project, one that many thought beyond our means as a congregation." He gestured to the new wing, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows I had selected. "What you see around you, this beautiful space where we've celebrated weddings, baptisms, and countless moments of community, exists largely because of one person's vision and dedication." I felt my cheeks warm as he continued. "Lydia Matthews not only contributed the seed money from her inheritance but wrote the grants that secured additional funding. She coordinated volunteers, selected materials, and personally oversaw every aspect of construction. For 3 years, she gave her time, resources, and heart to this project, asking nothing in return, not even recognition." A murmur rippled through the congregation. Some knew this already. Others were hearing it for the first time. "Today, we correct an oversight. We acknowledge truth. We express gratitude." He turned to me. "Lydia, would you please come forward?" My legs carried me to the front, steady despite the flutter in my chest. I stood beside Father James, facing the congregation, friends, neighbors, fellow parishioners. And my father, sitting alone in the front pew, his expression a complex mixture of pride and regret. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" Father James asked gently. I hadn't prepared remarks. Hadn't expected to speak. But standing there, feeling visible perhaps for the first time in that space, words came naturally. "This church has always been more than a building to me," I began, my voice quiet but clear. "It's been a sanctuary, a community, a place where I learned that service is its own reward. When I contributed to the expansion, I wasn't looking for recognition. I was looking to create space, physical space where more people could gather, spiritual space where more souls could find peace." I paused, gathering my thoughts. But I've learned something important in recent weeks. While humility is a virtue, invisibility is not. There's a difference between serving quietly and allowing yourself to be erased. Between sharing credit and surrendering your truth. My eyes found my father's. He nodded slightly, encouraging me to continue. "This plaque," I gestured to the brass plate, "isn't about pride or acclaim. It's about truth. About acknowledging that each of us has gifts to offer, contributions to make, space to claim. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have helped build this wing. I'm equally grateful to stand here today, fully seen and acknowledged for that contribution." Father James stepped forward again. "Lydia, on behalf of St. Augustine's congregation, we present this plaque as a permanent acknowledgement of your generosity and leadership. May it remind all who enter here that sometimes the most profound gifts come from unexpected sources, and that God sees clearly what humans often overlook." He handed me a small box. Inside was a miniature replica of the plaque, suitable for display at home. The gesture was unexpected, touching in its thoughtfulness. The congregation applauded, not politely but enthusiastically, some even standing. Mrs. Keller from her seat at the organ. The Sunday school teachers lined up along the side wall. Bishop Montgomery, who I hadn't noticed until now, standing at the back of the church. And my father, rising slowly from his pew, hands coming together with deliberate purpose. The rest of the service passed in a blur of hymns and prayers and communion. Afterward, people lined up to speak with me, some offering congratulations, others sharing memories of watching the expansion take shape, a few apologizing for not realizing my role sooner. Through it all, Dad remained nearby, not hovering but present, occasionally fielding questions or conversations when I seemed overwhelmed. It was a new dynamic between us, not quite partnership but no longer the old hierarchy either. As the crowd thinned, Bishop Montgomery approached, hand extended. "Congratulations, Lydia. A well-deserved recognition." "Thank you, Bishop. And thank you again for the committee position. I'm looking forward to starting tomorrow." "We're the fortunate ones," he assured me. "Though I must admit, I'm curious about something." "What's that?" His eyes twinkled slightly. "How does it feel to stand in your truth this way?" I considered the question carefully. Like breathing fully after years of shallow breaths. Strange at first, then increasingly natural. He nodded as if I'd confirmed something he already knew. "The hardest walls to break are the ones we don't recognize as barriers. I suspect you've just dismantled quite a few, for yourself and others." As the last visitors departed, Dad and I stood together in the empty sanctuary, sunlight streaming through the stained glass, casting colorful patterns across the pews. "Would you like to get lunch?" he asked suddenly. "There's a new place downtown I've been meaning to try." The invitation was awkward, tentative, a small bridge extended across a wide gap. I nodded. "I'd like that." The restaurant was quiet for a Sunday, allowing us a corner table away from other diners. We ordered, then sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken conversations hanging between us. "Your mother called this morning," he said finally. "She wanted to know if I was really attending the ceremony." I sipped my water, waiting. "I told her I was. That it was important to me to be there for you." He adjusted his napkin unnecessarily. "She didn't understand." "And Victoria? She's firmly in your mother's camp for now. Feels the whole thing is excessive." I nodded, unsurprised. "And you? Where do you stand in all this?" He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "I'm trying to stand in the truth, Lydia. It's unfamiliar territory after so many years of compromise." "Compromise?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Is that what we're calling it?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "No. You're right. It wasn't compromise. It was capitulation. To your mother's vision of family dynamics. To Victoria's need for constant affirmation. To my own cowardice in challenging either." The server brought our drinks, giving me a moment to absorb his unprecedented candor. "Why now?" I asked when we were alone again. "What changed?" He considered this, fingers tracing condensation on his water glass. "Seeing you stand up at church today. Hearing you speak about visibility versus erasure. It made me realize I've been complicit in something harmful. To you. To all of us, really." "How so?" "This family pattern, one child elevated, another diminished. It doesn't just hurt the one being diminished. It creates unrealistic expectations for the chosen one. Puts pressure on them to maintain that status. Prevents authentic relationships." He shook his head sadly. "Your grandfather tried to tell me once. I didn't listen." The mention of my grandfather made me think of the letter Mrs. Keller had delivered. He saw the pattern clearly. Yes, he did. He lived it himself, with his brother. Dad's eyes found mine. "I don't expect things to change overnight, Lydia. Your mother has decades invested in her version of reality. Victoria has built her identity around being the star of the family. But I want you to know that I see it now. And I'm sorry. Deeply sorry." The words settled between us, not magically healing decades of imbalance but acknowledging the wound. It was a beginning. Our food arrived, giving us both a moment to reset. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, my new position at the diocese, a book he'd been reading, memories of the church before the expansion. Not the forced small talk of strangers but the careful reconnection of people with shared history. Trying to find new common ground. After lunch, he walked me to my car. "I'd like to see your office once you're settled," he said. "Maybe stop by sometime next week?" I nodded, surprised by how much the simple request meant. "I'd like that." As I drove home, the miniature plaque sitting on the passenger seat caught the afternoon sunlight, sending brass reflections dancing across the dashboard. A tangible reminder that truth, once spoken, cannot be unheard. Monday morning arrived with purpose and anticipation. I dressed carefully for my first day at the diocesan office, not to impress but to embody the role I was stepping into. Leadership, not support. Vision, not implementation. My name on the door, not in the footnotes. Margaret greeted me warmly, showing me to a spacious office with large windows overlooking the city. Bishop Montgomery insisted you have this space, she explained. Said you'd need room to build something important. On the desk sat a welcome basket and a card signed by the entire committee. Simple gestures that spoke volumes about the culture. I was entering one where contributions were acknowledged, where value was assumed rather than questioned. By mid-morning, I was deep in planning for the first phase of the community outreach initiative. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Heard about your new position from Bishop Montgomery. Impressive work with the St. Augustine expansion. I run the Architectural Preservation Committee for Historic Churches. Would love to discuss potential collaboration. Nathan Reed, I smiled, adding it to my growing list of connections and possibilities. This was what visibility created, not just recognition but opportunity, collaboration, expansion beyond what had previously seemed possible. At lunchtime, Father James stopped by, carrying 2 sandwiches from the cafe down the street. Thought. You might be too busy to break for lunch, he explained, settling into the chair across from my desk. Perfect timing, I admitted, realizing I'd worked straight through the morning without pause. How was the rest of Sunday after I left? Interesting, he said, unwrapping his sandwich. Several people mentioned they'd never realized your role in the expansion. Mrs. Keller apparently gave quite the impassioned speech at coffee hour about recognizing quiet contributions. I laughed, imagining the soft-spoken organist holding court. She's been unexpectedly supportive through all this. Not unexpected if you knew her story, Father James countered. Did you know she was once offered a position at the National Cathedral? Turned it down because her husband's career was deemed more important. She recognizes the pattern you've been living with. I absorbed this new information about the gentle woman who delivered my grandfather's letter. I had no idea. Many people carry hidden stories, he said thoughtfully. Which is why visible truth matters so much. It creates space for others to step into their own light. As if to prove his point, my email chimed with a message from a young woman at St. Augustine's. Miss Matthews, I was at the recognition ceremony yesterday. I've been volunteering with the youth group for 2 years but always hesitated to suggest leading the program even though I have ideas for improvement. Watching you stand up there made me realize I've been making myself smaller than necessary. I'm meeting with Father James tomorrow to discuss taking on the youth director role. Thank you for the inspiration. Megan Porter, I showed Father James the email, a lump forming in my throat. You see, he said gently. Your courage creates ripples. After he left, I sat at my desk looking out over the city, thinking about ripples and courage and the unexpected ways truth can transform not just individual lives but entire communities. My phone rang, Victoria's ringtone. I hesitated, then answered. What? Her voice was sharp, defensive without preamble. Hello to you too, Victoria, I replied calmly. Dad's acting weird. Mom's upset. The whole church is talking. Are you happy now? I considered my response carefully. I'm not happy about family discord, no. But I am at peace with the truth being acknowledged. The truth, she repeated, the word dripping with sarcasm. Your version of it, anyway. The verifiable facts, I corrected gently. My inheritance funding the project. My coordination of the expansion. My name absent from the original records. She made an impatient sound. Whatever. Mom's thinking of leaving town for a while. Says she can't face people at the club after this spectacle. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. I'm sorry she's struggling, Victoria. Truly. But I'm not responsible for her reaction to reality. That's cold, Lydia. No, I countered. What's cold is erasing someone's contributions for years, then blaming them for the discomfort when the truth emerges. Silence stretched between us. Then, surprisingly, her tone shifted slightly. Dad says you have some big-shot job at the diocese now. I'm heading a new community outreach initiative, I confirmed. Started today, actually. Another pause. Well, congratulations, I guess. The words seemed physically painful for her to say, but they were there, a microscopic crack in her defensive armor. Thank you, I said simply. This doesn't mean I agree with how you've handled things, she added quickly. Or that Mom will come around. I understand. After we hung up, I sat with the conversation, turning it over in my mind. Not reconciliation, not even close. But perhaps the first faltering step toward a new equilibrium, one based on truth rather than prescribed roles and carefully maintained illusions. By late afternoon, I'd drafted initial proposals for 3 parishes, arranged meetings with community leaders, and begun assembling a volunteer coordination plan. The work was challenging, energizing, perfectly aligned with my strengths and vision. As I gathered my things to leave, Bishop Montgomery appeared in my doorway. "Productive first day?" he asked, smiling at the organized chaos of papers and notes covering my desk. "Very," I confirmed. "Though I'm realizing the scope is even larger than we discussed." He nodded. "That's precisely why we needed someone with your particular gifts. Someone who sees possibilities where others see obstacles." "Thank you for the opportunity," I said. "For seeing something in me that others missed." "I can't take credit for seeing it first," he replied. "You've always been visible, Lydia. Some just chose not to look." He gestured to the office around us. "This is where you've been headed all along." The path was just obscured for a while. After he left, I stood at the window watching the city transition from workday to evening. Lights flickered on in office buildings. Traffic thickened as people headed home. In the distance, St. Augustine's steeple caught the last golden rays of sunlight. 3 weeks ago, I had stood in that church arranging flowers for my sister's wedding, accepting the gray dress and background role assigned to me. Today, I stood in an office with my name on the door, leading an initiative that would touch thousands of lives, my contribution to the church expansion permanently acknowledged. Not because I had fundamentally changed, but because I had finally stopped accepting invisibility as my birthright. That evening, I met Mrs. Keller for dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. She'd called that afternoon, saying there was something else she wanted to share with me. She arrived wearing a colorful scarf, looking more vibrant than I'd ever seen her at church. "Retirement suits you," I observed as we settled at our table. She laughed. "Freedom suits me. Took me long enough to claim it." Over pasta and wine, she told me her story, the National Cathedral opportunity, her husband's insistence that her career was secondary, the decades spent playing organ for St. Augustine's while teaching piano lessons to make ends meet. "After Martin died, I kept living small," she admitted. "It was what I knew. What felt safe." She reached into her purse and pulled out a brochure, sliding it across the table. "Until last year." I picked it up, European Cathedral Music Tour, emblazoned across the top, with Mrs. Keller's name listed as lead organist and musical director. "You did this?" I asked, amazed. She nodded, eyes sparkling. 3 weeks, 6 countries, 12 historic cathedrals. At 72 years old. "That's incredible," I said sincerely. "Why didn't I know about this?" "Because I kept it quiet," she admitted. "Old habits. But after your recognition ceremony yesterday, I realized I was still hiding my light. Still acting as if my accomplishments needed to be whispered rather than celebrated." She reached across the table, covering my hand with her weathered one. "That's what I wanted to tell you, Lydia. What you did, standing in your truth, refusing invisibility, it matters beyond just your situation. It gives permission to others. Creates a ripple effect." I thought of Megan's email, of the subtle shift in Victoria's tone, of my father sitting in the front pew at the ceremony. "I'm beginning to see that. Your grandfather would be so proud," she said softly. "He saw this in you long ago, this quiet strength, this capacity for leadership without domination, for visibility without vanity." We finished dinner, sharing stories and possibilities, 2 women at different stages of life but connected by common experience and newfound determination to occupy our rightful space. As we parted outside the restaurant, she hugged me tightly. "Remember, claiming your light doesn't dim anyone else's. It just makes the whole world brighter." I drove home through quiet streets, her words echoing in my mind. The apartment felt different somehow when I entered, not physically changed but energetically shifted. I moved through the rooms turning on lamps, creating pools of warm light against the darkness outside. On my bedside table, I placed the miniature plaque from the church. Next to it, my grandfather's letter. 2 tangible reminders that I had always been worthy of recognition, had always deserved to occupy space fully and without apology. My phone chimed with a text from Dad, "Proud of you today. Dinner Thursday?" A simple message, but one that would have been unthinkable a month ago. I replied with a quick yes, looking forward to it, then set the phone aside. Standing at my window, looking out at the city lights, I thought about Mrs. Keller's cathedral tour at 72. About Megan stepping up to lead the youth program. About ripples expanding outward from a single act of truth-telling. The church expansion had begun with a vision, mine, though few had acknowledged it until now. The community outreach initiative was beginning the same way. But perhaps the most important expansion was happening internally, the growing recognition that I was neither supporting character nor background figure in my own life story. I was the architect, the visionary, the builder. I was Lydia Matthews, seen, acknowledged, standing in my truth without apology or qualification. And from this foundation of visibility, anything was possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout Stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.